Hi, so I want to talk about something that actually probably doesn't get said enough. I think it's something that we're all living through right now. It's about paying attention. And I mean really paying attention, not doom scrolling, but actually looking to see what's happening in the world right now and refusing to look away, because I think it's a genuinely remarkable thing to be able to do. I'm sorry to say that most people can't, not because they're less intelligent or less capable, but because it's hard. It costs us something, because we would prefer to live in comfort and in certainty and to be distracted by the things that are going on around us rather than actually having to face it all. And I'm in there too, by the way, because after all, we're all just trying to live our life. But you've come to this page, so you're not just doing that. And I think that's worth acknowledging too before we go anywhere else, because we spend so much time talking about what's wrong, what's heavy, what's lost, and not enough time thinking about the ability to be able to see things clearly, even when what you're seeing is really hard. And I think that is actually a kind of a gift. So what do we do with that? So if you've landed on this page, I think I can sort of guess the kind of person that you might be. It might be that you've woken up, and you could have woken up quite gradually or maybe all at once, but you woke up to the fact that the world is complicated and it's different to the story that you were handed. That the systems that we thought were here to protect us are actually doing something quite different. And that's quite significant. And unfortunately, someone somewhere thought that you shouldn't notice that system, but you did. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. And I appreciate that can feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, because there is a grief that comes with that. We want a simpler world. We want there to be certainty. And when we don't have those things in place, it actually brings us a lot of exhaustion. Because once you see the patterns, you can't stop seeing them because they're everywhere. But I want to put something right next to that too. There's something really electric about seeing the world for what it is. It's like that moment that you have a piece of thinking that it's cracked open something inside your brain and it's really opened up the world to you. It's like when you see a historical parallel and it comes into focus, or when you connect two ideas that nobody has told you are connected, but you've seen it. And that's not nothing, that's actually quite a lot. And I think, to me, that means that's the aliveness of being a conscious human being. And that's doing exactly what conscious human beings are built to do, which is to understand and to make meaning and to find patterns and to refuse just the surface level version of what we've been told. But when we do talk about awakening, we do seem to only think that it's heavy. But I actually think one of the most interesting things about awakening is probably one of the most interesting things that can happen to us as a person. Right now, a lot of us are finding the way easier to locate than the wonder. I get that. It's harder for us to be able to see the exceptional amazingness of it all when it is feeling pitted in our stomach. That's not accidental, because that's actually how attention works inside systems of power. When a population feels overwhelmed, when a population is scared, when they are exhausted, and when they're isolated, it makes it really difficult for them to think about what the possibilities are. It makes it impossible to think what the world would look like if people actually pulled together. And that's not a conspiracy, but it just requires a system that, consciously or not, creates conditions that serve it best. And the condition that serves it best is people who are too depleted to imagine anything differently. When you feel, and when I feel, like our choices don't matter, like it's all too big, that nothing we do is going to change anything, that is a feeling that's actually been cultivated. Not entirely, because there are genuinely real problems out there, but that feeling of absolute powerlessness, that's been grown, that's been manufactured, that is part of the architecture. So what do we do about that? Well, I can tell you it's not about getting angry and it's not about pushing against it, but it is about staying interested. It is about staying awake, and it is refusing to let the weight of everything that's going on stop our curiosity. And I know that sounds really small, but actually it's quite radical and it's quite big, because consciousness compounds. So every shift that we have seen in human history has worked not through the actions of a small group of people at the top, but through a really slow, uneven, unglamorous, possibly quite boring accumulation of people who kept paying attention when it would have been so much easier to look away. Okay, so I've been obsessed with patterns for as long as I can remember. I think it has something to do with my ADHD. It's never been an academic exercise. It's literally just how I try to make sense of the world. But what I really love is how our ancient wisdom traditions and modern psychology are actually now saying the same things, but just in different languages. And I find it really interesting that power structures have repeated across centuries. Also, how our own inner work and our collective outer do actually change through the same movement, but just at different scales. I work with organisations and culture. I look at the architecture of something and I look at how people behave in systems. And one thing that I see consistently is that people know when something is off. They know when the stated values are different from the lived values, and they know when they're being managed or when they're being led. And they really notice the difference when something is wrong. But they've been taught to doubt what they know. And that isn't unique to organisations, because it happens inside any system that needs you to be compliant to function. And you learn, not because you've been told, but you see what's been rewarded and you see what's punished, that your perception is unreliable. So you're told that the discomfort that you're feeling is actually a personal problem rather than an accurate reading of what's really happening. And that the thing is that you need to do is to manage your emotions, but not trust them. What history actually tells us and shows us is that the people who drove change were almost always the ones who listened to their knowledge, to their perceptions. And I don't mean blindly or without questioning it, but fundamentally, they chose to believe that what they could see was real and that what they could imagine would be possible. And the mystics have done this, and you see artists, they're doing all these things all the time. And in fact, anybody who has built some sort of movement, and possibly the movements that we now take for granted, they just went with it. And none of that was inevitable at the time. In fact, it was really unreasonable. The act of those people decided that their sense of what should be was not a vain hope, but it was about having faith. Let's talk about hope for a minute. I do believe we may have inherited a broken version of it. The version that we have seems to be like, okay, if we believe in something hard enough, things will probably work out as long as we stay positive. So we're just going to keep our fingers crossed and stay positive and everything will be fine. But when the evidence doesn't support that and the world makes it very clear that things don't work out that way, our version of hope then collapses and then we're left with nothing. But that is not the only version of hope. There is a completely different kind of hope that the people who've actually changed things have always operated from. And Václav Havel called it hope as a state of mind, not a state of the world. So it doesn't depend or rely on whether the evidence is good. It's not contingent with the outcome being certain, but it's more like a decision or an orientation towards what is possible and allowing that possibility of things being other than what they are currently. So it means that you can do the work even when the work isn't working yet. It's about what lets you show up even when showing up feels pointless right now. And it's what makes a difference between people who change things and people who are waiting to feel ready before they try. And here's the radical bit. You embody the world you want to exist. Let that sit for a minute. You embody the world you want to exist. Not as a performance, and that's not denying what's real or what's happening, but as a genuine act of imagination that's been made physical. So if you live as though certain things are true, that people deserve dignity, that consciousness matters, that collective flourishing is possible, then you will actually make those things more real. And that's not soft or naive, it's one of the most rigorous and demanding things that any person can do. The mystics who lived this way, they weren't less serious than the cynics, they were just less apologetic about it. You are allowed to find this work, this uncovering of the world, exciting. You are allowed to feel the wonder of it alongside the weight of it. In fact, I'd probably argue that that is the part that makes it sustainable. It's the joy. Joy isn't the opposite of taking things seriously, but it actually might be the proof that you are, that it means something to you. So this is what I want to leave you with, and it's not a plan or a list, and it's not a step-by-step of what you need to do right now. It is just this. You are living through a moment that is genuinely significant. And I'm not talking about in a disaster movie type of way, but in the sense that shifts in human consciousness are real. They are happening. And they are made up of individual people choosing, one at a time, to keep paying attention. You are one of those people. And that is not a small thing. Because the more of us who stay curious, instead of collapsing into certainty, the more of us who stay interested instead of checking out, who refuse to let the size of the problem become an excuse, the more the centre of gravity moves. Slowly, unevenly, never in a straight line, but it moves. You don't need to, and you can't fix everything, but you do need to stay awake and keep going. And you do need to let the work matter to you without letting the outcome define you. And you do need to let yourself enjoy it. The thinking, the connecting, the occasional electric moment when something clicks in place and you feel the current of it running through your whole body. Because that is the signal that you're doing exactly what you're meant to do, which is exactly what you're built for. And that's where everything begins. If you found this at the right moment, please share it. Subscribe if you want more of this conversation, and you can come and find me on Substack, and the link is below. And in those articles, I go even deeper every week. Do leave me a comment. Tell me what you're finding electric right now, because I really am interested. I want to know what's making you lean forward instead of back, because that conversation matters. I'll see you in the next one.